Have you ever stopped to ask yourself what you're truly seeking in those moments of intimate solitude? I'm not talking about the obvious physical release or the momentary pleasure that floods your senses. I'm talking about something much deeper, something that touches the very core of your being. What if I told you that behind every act of masturbation lies a profound psychological search, a quest that reveals the deepest longings of your soul? I am Carl Jung, and throughout my life as a psychiatrist and explorer of the human psyche, I have dared to venture into the hidden chambers of the unconscious mind. I have come to understand that nothing we do is ever purely physical. Every action, every impulse, every desire carries within it a symbolic meaning that connects us to the vast unconscious landscape of our inner world. And masturbation, despite being one of humanity's most private acts, is no exception to this rule. Today, I want to take you on a journey that most people never dare to take. I want to look beyond the surface, beyond the shame and guilt that society has wrapped around this natural human behavior, and reveal what I have discovered you're really searching for when you touch yourself. This isn't about judgment or morality. This is about understanding the profound psychological forces that drive us toward connection, wholeness, and meaning. Let's dive deep into what I call the architecture of desire. When I spoke about human sexuality, I wasn't just talking about bodies coming together or the mechanics of pleasure. I was talking about something far more profound, what I call the search for the missing piece of the soul. According to my observations, every human being walks through life with a sense of incompleteness, a feeling that something essential is missing from their existence. This isn't pathological, it's not a sign of weakness. It's the fundamental condition of human consciousness. Think about it for a moment. When you masturbate, what exactly are you reaching for? On the surface, it might seem like you're simply seeking physical satisfaction, a release of tension, a moment of pleasure in an otherwise stressful day. But I would argue that you're actually reaching for something much more profound. You're reaching for unity, for completeness, for a momentary return to that state of wholeness that you experienced before you became aware of yourself as a separate, isolated individual. I believe that the act of masturbation often represents what I called the search for the divine hermaphrodite, the perfect union of masculine and feminine energies within the self. When you touch yourself, you're not just stimulating nerve endings. You're attempting to bridge the gap between your conscious self and your unconscious depths. You're trying to heal the fundamental split that exists within every human psyche. This is why masturbation can feel so profoundly satisfying and yet so ultimately empty at the same time. In that moment of climax, you experience a brief dissolution of boundaries, a temporary return to unity. But because this unity is achieved through solitary action rather than genuine integration, it quickly fades, leaving you with that familiar sense of hollowness that so many people experience afterward. I understood that this hollowness isn't a sign that you've done something wrong. It's a sign that you've touched something real, something important, but you haven't yet learned how to integrate it into your conscious life. You've had a glimpse of wholeness, but you haven't yet developed the psychological tools to make that wholeness permanent, to understand what you're really searching for when you masturbate. We need to explore one of my most revolutionary concepts, the idea of the anima and animus. These aren't just abstract psychological theories. They're living, breathing aspects of your psyche that influence every relationship you have, including the relationship you have with yourself. The anima, according to my research, is the feminine aspect that exists within every man. It's composed of all the feminine influences he's encountered throughout his life, his mother, his sisters, his lovers, his female friends, even the feminine characters he's encountered in books and movies. The animus is the masculine aspect that exists within every woman, formed by her experiences with fathers, brothers, male partners, and masculine archetypes. Now, here's where this becomes relevant to masturbation. When you engage in this solitary act, you're not really alone. You're engaging with your internal anima or animus. You're having a relationship with the contrasexual aspect of your own psyche, the fantasies that arise during masturbation, the images that excite you, the scenarios that unfold in your mind. These aren't random neural firings. They're communications from your anima or animus, messages about what you need for psychological wholeness. If you're a man who consistently fantasizes about dominant women during masturbation, your anima might be trying to tell you that you need to develop a stronger relationship with your own inner authority. If you're a woman who fantasizes about being completely possessed by a powerful male figure, your animus might be communicating your need to integrate more assertive, decisive energy into your conscious personality. I believe that many people spend their entire lives projecting their anima or animus onto external partners, desperately seeking in others what they refuse to develop within themselves. Masturbation in this context becomes a kind of practice ground for these projections. It's where you rehearse the relationships you want to have, where you explore the aspects of yourself that you haven't yet fully integrated. But here's the crucial insight that I would want you to understand. The person you're fantasizing about during masturbation isn't really separate from you. That dominant woman, that tender man, that mysterious stranger who appears in your private moments, they're all aspects of your own psyche calling out for recognition and integration. This is why I emphasize the importance of what I called active imagination. Instead of simply using masturbation as a way to discharge sexual tension, I would encourage you to engage consciously with the figures that appear in your fantasies. Who are they? What do they represent? What qualities do they possess that you haven't yet developed in yourself? What are they trying to teach you about wholeness and integration? When you begin to approach masturbation from this perspective, it transforms from a purely physical act into a profound psychological exploration. You're no longer just seeking release, you're seeking relationship, not just with imagined others, but with the hidden aspects of your own soul. But there's another layer to this search that I identified, something I called the return to the Ouroboros. The Ouroboros is an ancient symbol depicting a serpent eating its own tail, representing the cyclical nature of life, death, and rebirth. I saw this symbol as representing the human longing to return to the undifferentiated state of early infancy, when there was no separation between self and world, no awareness of individual identity, no experience of existential isolation. When you masturbate, especially when you do it compulsively or habitually, you might be unconsciously seeking this return to the Ouroboros. You're trying to escape the burden of individual consciousness, the weight of being a separate, responsible, isolated human being. In the moment of sexual climax, the ego temporarily dissolves, and you experience a brief return to that primordial state of unity. This isn't necessarily unhealthy, but I would warn against using it as a permanent escape from the challenges of conscious life. The goal isn't to remain in the Euroboric state, but to integrate its wisdom into your mature adult consciousness. This means learning to experience unity and connection without losing your individual identity. It means finding ways to touch the sacred without abandoning the responsibilities of human life. I also recognize that masturbation could be a form of what I call shadow work, though most people don't realize it. The shadow, in my psychology, represents all the aspects of yourself that you've learned to hide, repress, or deny. These might be aggressive impulses, tender feelings, creative desires, or sexual fantasies that don't align with your conscious self-image. During masturbation, the shadow often emerges in the form of fantasies that might shock or disturb your conscious mind. You might find yourself aroused by scenarios that go against your moral beliefs, attracted to people you would never pursue in real life, or excited by dynamics that seem to contradict your conscious values. I would say that these aren't signs of perversion or moral failure. They're communications from your shadow, aspects of yourself that need to be acknowledged and integrated. The key is not to act out these shadow fantasies literally, but to understand what they're trying to tell you about your psychological wholeness. If you consistently fantasize about power and domination, your shadow might be telling you that you need to develop more assertiveness in your conscious life. If you're drawn to scenarios of submission and surrender, you might need to learn how to let go of excessive control and trust the flow of life. I believe that the shadow contains not just our repressed negativity, but also our unrealized potential. The fantasies that emerge during masturbation might be showing you aspects of yourself that you haven't yet developed, creative energies that you haven't yet expressed, ways of being that could enrich your conscious life if properly integrated. This brings us to one one of my most important insights about what you're really searching for when you masturbate. You're searching for what I call the transcendent function, the psychological mechanism that bridges the gap between conscious and unconscious, between ego and shadow, between the individual and the collective. The transcendent function is what allows you to integrate opposing forces within your psyche and achieve a higher level of psychological wholeness. During masturbation, you often experience a temporary activation of the transcendent function. The boundaries between conscious and unconscious become permeable. Repressed energies are allowed to surface. Opposing forces within your psyche come into dynamic tension. In the moment of climax, these tensions are temporarily resolved in a burst of unified energy. But I would emphasize that this temporary activation isn't enough for true psychological development. The goal is to learn how to access the transcendent function consciously without needing to resort to purely physical means. This is what I meant by individuation, the process of becoming whole, of integrating all aspects of yourself into a unified conscious personality. From this perspective, masturbation can be seen as a kind of practice for individuation. It's a way of exploring the hidden aspects of your psyche, of experimenting with different ways of being, of touching the depths of your unconscious mind. But it's not the destination, it's preparation for the real work of psychological integration that takes place in your conscious waking life. I also understood that what you're searching for during masturbation is often a return to what I call the eternal feminine or the eternal masculine. These aren't gender roles or social constructs. They're archetypal energies that exist within the collective unconscious of humanity. The eternal feminine represents the receptive, nurturing, intuitive aspects of human nature. The eternal masculine represents the active, penetrating, rational aspects. Most people, regardless of their biological sex, have been cut off from one or both of these energies by social conditioning, family dynamics, or cultural expectations. Men are often disconnected from their eternal feminine, taught to suppress tenderness, receptivity, and emotional depth. Women are often disconnected from their eternal masculine, discouraged from expressing assertiveness, ambition, and intellectual power. During masturbation, you might be unconsciously seeking reunion with whichever archetypal energy you've been cut off from. Your fantasies might be calling you back to the suppressed aspects of your own nature. If you're a man who fantasizes about powerful, nurturing women, you might be seeking reconnection with your own capacity for care and emotional depth. If you're a woman who fantasizes about being taken by a strong, decisive man, you might be calling forth your own capacity for clear action and bold expression. The tragedy, according to my observations, is that most people never recognize these fantasies as calls to inner development. Instead, they project these archetypal energies onto external partners, desperately seeking in relationships what they refuse to develop within themselves. This leads to what I called unconscious possession, where you become dependent on others to provide the psychological completion that only you can give yourself. I believe that true psychological maturity involves learning to embody both the eternal feminine and eternal masculine within yourself, regardless of your biological sex. This doesn't mean becoming androgynous or losing your sexual identity. It means becoming whole, integrating all aspects of human nature into your conscious personality. When you understand this, masturbation can become a tool for individuation rather than just a means of physical release. You can use it as an opportunity to explore the archetypal energies that are calling for integration in your life. You can consciously engage with the figures that appear in your fantasies, learning from them, allowing them to teach you about the aspects of yourself that need development. But I would also warn against getting stuck in the fantasy realm. The ultimate goal isn't to perfect your imaginary relationships, but to bring the insights gained from these inner explorations into your real-world relationships and creative expressions. The energy that you generate during masturbation, the archetypal connections you make, the shadow aspects you encounter, all of this needs to be integrated into your conscious life if it's going to serve your psychological development. This brings us to another crucial aspect of what you're searching for during masturbation. You're searching for what I call the religious function of the psyche. This has nothing to do with with organized religion or specific spiritual beliefs. It's about the human need to connect with something greater than the individual ego, to experience transcendence, to touch the sacred dimension of existence. I observed that many of my patients who had lost connection with traditional religious practices were unconsciously seeking spiritual experience through sexual activity. The intensity of sexual pleasure, the dissolution of ego boundaries during climax, the sense of connection with primal life forces, all of these can provide a temporary taste of transcendence. During masturbation, you might be unconsciously seeking this connection with the sacred. The fantasies that arise might be attempting to create a sense of communion with archetypal energies, with the divine masculine or feminine, with the creative forces of the universe. The physical pleasure might be a gateway to experiences of unity, transcendence, and spiritual connection. I would encourage you to recognize and honor this spiritual dimension of your sexuality, but I would also caution against confusing the gateway with the destination. The goal isn't to use masturbation as a substitute for genuine spiritual practice, but to understand what it's revealing about your deeper spiritual needs and then find more sustainable ways to meet those needs. This might involve developing a meditation practice, engaging in creative expression, spending time in nature, or exploring whatever spiritual traditions resonate with your soul. The key is to recognize that the hunger for transcendence that drives much of your sexual behavior is actually a spiritual hunger that can be fed in many different ways. As we near the end of our exploration, it's important to address one final aspect of what you're searching for during masturbation. According to my understanding, you're often searching for what I call the conjunctio, the sacred marriage between opposing forces within your psyche. This isn't just about masculine and feminine energies. It's about the integration of all polarities, conscious and unconscious, light and shadow, spiritual and material, individual and collective. The conjunctio represents the ultimate goal of psychological development, the achievement of wholeness through the integration of opposites. During masturbation, you might be unconsciously rehearsing this sacred marriage, bringing together aspects of yourself that are normally kept separate, allowing opposing energies to dance together in dynamic harmony. But I understood that the conjunctio achieved through masturbation is temporary and ultimately illusory. True integration requires conscious work, the willingness to face your shadows, to develop your unlived potentials, to embrace the full spectrum of your humanity. It requires what I call the courage to be disturbed, the willingness to let your neat, comfortable self-image be shattered so that a more complete version of yourself can emerge. So what are you really searching for when you masturbate? According to my lifetime of research and clinical observation, you're searching for nothing less than psychological wholeness. You're seeking reunion with the lost aspects of your soul. You're trying to heal the fundamental splits that exist within every human psyche. You're reaching for transcendence, for connection, for the sacred marriage of opposites that would make you truly complete. This search is not shameful or pathological. It's profoundly human. It's the same search that drives all great art, all spiritual practice, all genuine love. The tragedy is that most people never recognize this search for what it truly is. They get caught up in the physical mechanics, the guilt and shame, the compulsive patterns, without ever understanding the deeper psychological and spiritual forces that are driving their behavior. I would invite you to approach your sexuality, including masturbation, with consciousness and reverence. To see it not as a mere physical act, but as a window into the deepest longings of your soul. To use it as a tool for self-discovery rather than just physical release. To honor the archetypal energies that emerge during these intimate moments, and to find ways to integrate their wisdom into your conscious life. Remember, the goal isn't to stop masturbating or to feel guilty about it. The goal is to understand what it's revealing about your psychological and spiritual needs, and then to find sustainable ways to meet those needs that support your overall development as a human being. The next time you feel drawn to this intimate act, pause for a moment and ask yourself, what am I really searching for? What aspect of wholeness am I trying to touch? What part of my soul is crying out for integration? These questions can transform a simple physical act into a profound opportunity for self-discovery and psychological growth. Until next time, remember that every aspect of your humanity, including your sexuality, is a sacred part of your journey toward becoming who you truly are. The search for wholeness, that drives you toward intimate moments with yourself is the same search that can lead you toward a more complete, integrated, and authentic way of being in the world.